So walk me through that last moment where, I mean, like, how do you remember it happening? And also, what's really interesting is he ultimately snaps because you call him gay. Later, he did in fact come out. But what made you think, had he come out to you in the house, or like what made you
No,
think that he was gay?
no, I had no idea. No, I was a kid. I was a virgin myself. I don't even think I would have cared. I think it was a very toxic environment with like two guys in the 90s. And I think there was sort of this like machoism around the house. And, I used to joke around because I'd been friends with Steven that I was going to marry him someday because
Uh-huh.
he was always ironing and cooking and like doing stuff where I'm like, I'm going to be the worst wife. And I totally like we would joke about that. I don't remember any discussions about who he was in bed with. I don't remember and I'm sure I probably didn't care. I do remember being offended with like how much kind of macho talk there was. Like I remember thinking like that's kind of lame. We're like, but all that being said, it wasn't like some preconceived thing. It was not like I had a plan. I was just young and very angry and really wanted my stuffed animal back. And I remember giving him, like, he didn't just take the stuffed animal, by the way. However, my daughter has a stuffed animal she sleeps with every night. The idea that like some individual would take her stuffed animal, like that's so sadistic and mean. And I just kept being like, give it back. It's like my childhood stuffed animal, dude. Like, what would you possibly, like, why would you take that from someone? Like, that's crazy. And he just didn't give it back. And I just remember thinking, like, I'm going to ask him one more time. And I remember I took the garbage out and I asked him, and he just lied. And I was just like, the rage I felt inside of me. And you have to remember, I was already really angry because for days, this man, and I feel like people forget that, like, because they only remember a little of what they saw on TV. That man called me the B word so many times. Like, it was a deep rage for like being mistreated for so long. And then it was just like, I'm about to leave this place. Like, you've taken my ski jacket, you've taken my other shit. I'm letting it like that's weird in and of itself. Just give me my stuffed animal. That could mean nothing to you. But I didn't do anything. Like I just went and got the rest of my stuff. And he came out and that's why I was walking to the car and he just didn't tell me the truth. And then I just snapped. And I said, you and I could never get married because you're homosexual, which looking back is like like horrible, horrible thing to do and say. And especially because I had no stake in it. I was just so livid. And I think a part of me knew in that macho atmosphere, he would be pissed off.
Did production try to get you to stay? Like, it's
That's
interesting that they just like
yes.
let you go.
No, they tried to get me to stay in Nepal. But then by the time I was leaving, I mean, what had happened was Stephen had ransacked my room. And when I came back and saw what it looked like, I was like, I'm out of here. And then instead of giving them what they wanted, which I'm sure was like a big dramatic reaction, in my head, I was like very calm. And I was like, I'm leaving. I'm not discussing it. Like, I'm just leaving this house.
So,
Because you almost forget you can leave.
mhm.
You forget that that's on the table. It's almost,
And
um,
where was that car taking you? Like, where did you where were you intending to go?
my grandmother was in town and my aunt Dolly, they were coming to visit me. And so I was just going to go to their hotel room. And what's so creepy was I got a page on my pager because we had pagers back then that said, please return your microphone. Thank you very much.
Oh my
That's what it said.
God.
physically assaulted. And like, it's just crazy.
I mean,
Like they
you see him, he opened, for some reason, like the door was unlocked. He opens the car door and he hits you. And like, what happened production wise? Like, do you even know like what they did with him at that
no idea.
point?
No idea. No, I got a page like a few minutes later. I saw it on TV, obviously, and I was laughing, but I was crying. I don't remember laughing. I think like I was just as shocked that I had laughed at. Like I think it was just shock. Like I was leaving because this place had no limits and boundaries to when they would put down a camera and help out human life. And I had been preaching that for like the 24 hours before leaving and talking just about the production, which you weren't allowed to do. I was breaking every rule to be like, this isn't okay. Like, and I was trying to get like, I was trying to start my own, like, let's leave together. Come on, crew. Like, if you think it's bad, like, meanwhile, I'm telling these people who like can't get a regular job in Hollywood. I'm sure that's why they were like PAs for like the real world. Like, that's like the worst job in Hollywood back then. Like, nobody
Why?
wanted because nobody wanted to be in reality TV back then.
Oh, back
Like,
then. Mm-hmm.
like the reality TV was left for the people who wanted a job in production but didn't have context to get a job working in the movies or
Right.
unscripted. So it was not a coveted job to have. So meanwhile, I'm telling these people who are already like, I'm sure like I have the worst job in Hollywood. It's not even in Hollywood. I'm in Seattle. Like I'm sure they're like every day hating their
Yeah.
life. And little IRENE MCGEE is like, come on, we can leave together. Let's start a movement. I mean, it was very idealistic of me. But anyway, I remember my grandmother's hotel room was under my grandmother's name. And I was so screwed up at the time. I'm under my aunt's name, which is why they didn't find us. Apparently, they'd come to like a bunch of different hotels looking for me.
Like
Because I'm
with
sure,
a camera?
yes.
Oh, wow.
Well, I'm sure they wanted to do damage control as a
Yeah.
company. And I remember hiding in the back of my grandma's rental car and I was like lying on the floor because I didn't want we had to return the microphone, so I had to go with her so she would know where to go, but I didn't want them to know I was in the car.
So production literally did nothing. Like
Yeah,
MTV, like as a company.
nothing.
What happened? Did you have to do any additional like pickup interviews or any other like sit down chair interviews before it goes on the air? So it begins to air, and had they warned you that like, I mean, did you just assume, okay, they are going to keep this in, or like, or did part of you think that like they wouldn't air that?
Oh, I didn't think they would air it. I definitely did not think they would air it. I definitely did not think they would air it because you have to think of the time. It's still assault. Like, I did
Yeah.
not think they would air a woman. No, I didn't think they would air it. I didn't think they would air it. And then to see it got aired and then for it to like be this huge thing. And then in some ways it was a huge thing. It was aired on MTV all the
Oh
time.
yeah.
But and then in other ways, reality TV has like been able to do things in the world and yet not be discussed by real news programs, right? And so that moment, I think because it wasn't really covered by the news or anything like that, it just allowed for more space for things like that to happen.
When was the last time you spoke to any of these roommates?
That was my fear doing this interview. Like, what if you have my roommates pop up? Like, that would be awful.
In
And
this
now,
in the Zoom?
yeah,
Irene, I want all right, Steven, you can come on into the
yeah,
Zoom.
that would be awful.
That's hilarious. So you haven't spoken to any of them since 1998?
Not really. I mean, nothing meaningful. Like, I've seen David a few times throughout the years. He used to
Mm-hmm.
like, he worked in Vegas. I was in San Francisco. I'd see him through work stuff. Like, he's always fun to see, but like, never any meaningful.
I know from like knowing other real worlders that like pretty much every cast has been contacted for real world homecoming. I presume you've been contacted.
Oh yeah. Well, so this is where things take an interesting turn. So I got sick again after I had Rini, and I was working on a docu-series at the time. And so I had already been in contact with John Murray about this other project. And so we've kind of like John Murray created Bunim and Murray, and we're in a good place. You know, I think the other thing I've been able to do to sort of get over this is that I can definitely see that it's like a series of poor decisions that have led us to where we are today. And so like nobody's really complicit, and yet everybody's complicit. And that's how this whole genre has become what it is. So anyway, yeah, he reached out about Homecoming, but I was pregnant, and I was like, I just don't think it would be that interesting. Like, I would do it if I was meeting like Johnny Bananas and some other like interesting people. And then that was the house where it was like a bunch of interesting people. But like, my cast isn't that interesting.
Well, the stuff with you and Steven is. That's why I'm talking to you.
But outside of that, it wouldn't be that interesting of a show, would it? And what
Maybe
would
not.
Steven say?
Well, he has an interesting story that like he later came out like I don't know. We got to get cameras up. I mean, do you know? I mean, from what I understand, Janet won't do it because she works for Jay-Z. Like, did you? So it sounds like you would entertain the idea.
I see how it's like a bookend for people who watch the TV show. They want to see what happens if Steven and I were confronting each other. But I think it would just be like pretty, like, unless he came out still guns blazing and angry. Or, right? Like, I don't know. How did you feel like, did you watch the other Homecomings?
I did. I watched New York and New Orleans, and I have very interesting thought. I think they're, knowing what I know, it's more produced than ever. Like it's these well, the New York one was more authentic. It was maybe a little bit more fly on the wall, but once they did LA and then by the time they got to New Orleans, it's all like every segment has been planned out. There wasn't much room for spontaneity or authenticity. Maybe more spontaneity. Like everything is like they have a TV there that will then play a package and then get you to talk about it.
Yeah, I felt so bad. Who is the girl that left New Orleans early? Yeah, I felt bad for her because she left early and clearly very early. And even though they only filmed for 2 weeks, and she was like, it was edited like I was there, but I left her very early on. And it's like, I think that should show people how much they can edit. Like, I bet she left after like 3 days and was like,
maybe she was there like a week and change, and then it was like a couple days that she had missed.
Right. But there were definitely like events that she wasn't at. Yes. I mean, I watched part of that, but like Daniel decided we didn't need another streaming service. So I didn't get to watch.
That's so funny.
But we have since repurchased the streaming service because it had the new Paw Patrol on it. So now I guess I can find out what happened in the interim. Yeah. So it would be really set up.
The other storyline that stands out from your season is that David was dating a producer from the show while they start. Like, were you aware that he started this relationship? What was that woman's name?
Kira. No, I had no idea. I was very innocent. I wouldn't have known.
I mean, that's kind of interesting. That's really interesting.
He slept with the casting director. Of course, no one else had a chance of making it on the show. She was the casting director. Like, imagine if the genders were reversed on that, where the girl would sit in history.
That's a juicy. Yeah, they got to dig into that. All right, listen, we're filling out the show already.
I mean, I don't think. What else is interesting? Like, I just don't think it's that interesting of a show.
When was the last time you heard from John Murray? Like, are they still trying to make this happen? Like, I don't know if Homecoming has been picked up for additional seasons. I don't think so.
I don't think it's been picked up. I bet. And they'd have to get a certain amount. I still stand with my idea is better that they just get like more interesting people from every season and put them in a house. Like that to me still sounds more interesting. Because we can still revisit some old stuff, but then you get a bunch of really interesting people.
Yeah. What was your reaction when you saw the headline that Stephen was arrested for escorting?
I mean, listen, I always felt bad for Stephen because I always felt like he was cast to because he was such a weirdo in a lot of ways and had issues and they exploit people. I mean, he must have been really into drugs, I bet, and really needed money. And I mean, he must have been
A bad
in
spot.
a real, I mean, right, like an unrelatable bad spot.
Danny Roberts from New Orleans, he said this on the record. So in my interview with him, so I feel totally fine repeating it here. So they did the challenge together when they like throw different people together. And he told the story of how they shared a room and he was already getting like sort of like nutty vibes from Steven. And at one point in the middle of the night, Steven like went on top of him and he had to like push him off.
That makes me sad, right? Like he was a real tortured guy and young and like didn't have a good family. I mean, they take all these people with like families. You know, I think that's why I could probably leave the show. I like knew my parents. Like I have a very good relationship with them. Like I knew what real love was.
You had a support
And so
system.
I didn't fall victim to these producers blowing sunshine up my ass saying they loved me because
Right.
I knew what love felt like. This type of love isn't real. Like I think there was always this thing in me where I was like, I know who loves me and I know what feels good. And this is not that.
The button I want to just add to the whole like slap story is that if you flash forward, Snooki gets punched on Jersey Shore.
Taken off. Yeah. It's crazy.
And what in Snooki's case, they wound up not re-airing that. Like they pulled that from the final edit.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in yours, everyone knows this infamous clip. Like it's been replayed 10,000 times,
right,
like in perpetuity. It's interesting, like that. I mean, I guess that it was 10 years later, but
I think it's because of social media and people had the ability to like talk back. And then advertisers were like, that's crazy. This is where we draw the line. You know, it was top down media then. And then people couldn't really like raise the alarm of being like, that's not okay. And let me be clear, in no world is that okay. Like there's no comparison to anything. Like you do not hit somebody. Like it's against the law. You know, it's just crazy to me that that even happened and then that nothing happened.
did you try to sue MTV?
No. I mean, I did meet with a lawyer, but you know, my parents were just like, let's just go over this.
Okay.
Do you want this to be your life? Like they have a lot of
Right.
money. And so it was just very quickly, I was just like, yeah. The other thing that's different, like Daniel went to a party the other day and they were like, oh, we know who your wife is. She's the girl that hit that guy. Like people now think I hit him. That is like a new.
They misremember it.
They misremember it by a lot.
Wow.
Like that's like a pretty bad misremember.
That's crazy.
But they also don't care. Like it's not like they're like,